Hey, welcome back to Godot. So in this video, I'd like to get started on a new kind of series, and it'll be a little bit different. I spent a lot of time on the adventure world. I know it doesn't look like it, but they take. I have to have a big chunk of time to work on them, and so what I'll probably start doing for these series, because I'm gonna have to learn a lot more, is in most of the videos, I'm just gonna go ahead and do the work first, and then I'll come back and it'll be more like a video blog kind of thing, and I'll show like what I did and how I worked on it. But the big thing I want to start working on is VR. So Godot is VR capable, and I have a Oculus Rift headset, and I'm a huge fan of VR. I think it's really the superior way to interact with at least 3D games. So I thought we'd give this a shot, and this will give me a chance to learn quite a bit, as well as make some neat projects and get you guys either dipping your toes at least in 3D programming within Godot, and possibly VR if you're interested in that as well. So let's go ahead and get started. The first game I'm going to make is Weeping Angels, and this is based on a Doctor Who reference. And I saw somebody else make this, and I thought it was a really clever idea. And the reason I like it is it's very simple for interacting VR interactions, and so it'll be a good kind of like stepping stone along the way. So what I'll probably do is make a lot of little kind of small games, and we'll build up a library of VR code that will help us make a bigger project in the future. So I'm going to make that one first, but I thought in this first video we would look at how to set up Godot for VR. So it's real easy. I've got the latest version of Godot, which right now is 3.1.1, and all you need to do is make a new project. We're going to call this temp VR, because I'm going to delete this afterwards, and we'll create. You can leave it on OpenGL ES3 is fine. If you were going to port it to the phone, you would use this, but we're going to use the Oculus for this. Godot also supports OpenVR, which will come through your Steam, and so that can pick up some of the other headsets like a Vive and whatnot. I'm not sure if it will work on a Microsoft headset, but that would be an interesting thing to try. So now we're here, and we're going to make a 3D project. So let's go ahead and make a 3D scene, and we'll just call this main. And I'm not going to do anything fancy in here. I guess I could put a like block or something out. CSG. So Godot added these CSG objects, which are really handy for just plopping out things of certain shapes. So I can put out a block like that. Super easy to add. So we'll just go put him out there, and you can even set the material here. So I could say new spatial material, and then look at this, and right here, this albedo, I can set the color. So we'll just make it a red box. There we go. I'm going to save this scene, main, and so that's it right here. This is how you make a 3D game, and if I hit play, I don't have a camera, so I'm not sure what'll go. Yeah, so I can't move my camera, and I don't have a camera, so I guess it's using some sort of default, maybe. So I can add a camera if I wanted to, and that's a normal camera. And currently you can tell, by the way, you can move around by holding down your right mouse button, and now you can look around and move just like in a first-person shooter. And the E and Q key, WASD, moves you around, and E moves up and Q moves down. So that's how you can kind of navigate around. You can tell by this camera, it's got a little arrow pointing which way is up, and it's got this kind of box to indicate which direction it's facing. So currently it's looking off that way. If I run this, I'll just see sky with a plane for the horizon. So if I want to see this red box over here, I would need to turn it in that direction. Now I probably can see it. There it is. And you can also do this preview, and so you can preview what you would see out of that camera. Very good. One more thing for hotkeys: if you click on an object and hit the F key, it will jump the camera to that position, and you can kind of use that in conjunction with some other keys to kind of navigate, rotate around an object. Anyways, so yeah, if you get lost and you're like, oh, I can't find my block, you just hit the F key. You can select it over here, hit the F key, and you'll jump to it. Alright, so one thing is in VR we don't actually use this camera. You probably noticed it when I was adding one. Delete node. When I was adding this node for the camera, you saw this AR VR camera, and this is what's used for VR. However, we first need to pull in the Oculus stuff so that this will work with Oculus. So I'm going to go to the asset library right here, and this will load up with all kinds of goodies that are out there, and I'm going to search for Oculus. And so this is the Oculus VR module made by Bastian, and this is his I hope I'm saying his name right. Anyways, but that's his handle, and he makes this AR VR stuff, which is fantastic. So I click there and I download it, and now you also have to click install. So the first button just downloaded it to my local, and this one actually installs it. So these are all the files that are going to install, and you can go in here and select stuff and deselect it if you want, but in our case we pretty much need all of it, so we're going to go ahead and pull that in. Just waiting for this to go. The nice thing about this Godot module right here for Oculus is it has the models for the controllers already built in, so we'll be able to see those controllers in just a second. So back on my 3D tab, it's now brought into my project, and you can see it here under add-ons, Oculus, or Godot Oculus, and then there's some stuff in here. The thing that I want is underneath this scenes is there's a first person controller that he's already set up for us, scene. So we can just drag that in and drop it right here on our main. Now you could make this by hand, but this saves us some time. And if you click this down, you can see what's inside of it. But what we're going to do instead is I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say make local. And what that does is it basically just gets rid of this pointer to this scene and just splats it all out right here in our main scene. And the reason we're going to do that is because in the future we're going to edit some of this, specifically the hand stuff. And you pretty much would have a difficult time making much of a VR game without modifying some of these nodes, and it would be fine to modify this subscene, but we're just going to go ahead and do it here. You could also, if you wanted to keep this kind of pure, is you could copy this that subscene out and put it here in your project somewhere, like make a copy of it, and then use that reference to drop into your main. That would be important if you were doing multiple scenes. So let's zoom out and let's check out what's here. So now we see another camera. It looks very similar to the camera we had before. We've got the little up angle. It's harder to see because of the color. We've got the little up angle, the camera pointing out. But we also notice you've got these controllers floating here. So if I click on this left hand and right hand, you'll see these are nodes floating out in space. And this is also a node. And then we've got this first person node down here on the ground, and it's set at 0, 0. So this is going to be your feet, right? And so if you wanted to move the player around in the world and kind of like force their headset around, this is the node that you would move. And that will make the hands and the head and everything go with it. You've got the camera, and this represents the head, or your headset. And then there's a couple other things they've done here. This one is a HUD anchor, which is a little helper that he put in. And if you look at the script, basically all it does is it gets the camera transform and then removes the rotation to it so that it's always pointing straight forward. And you can use that for like a floating HUD in front of the player. Alright, and then we've got this this OVR shader cache. We'll look at that later. I had to look this up. He uses it to help with, if you have shaders in your scene and they change, it can cause like a really noticeable lag, and so that helps fix that problem. And then we've got the left and right hand controllers, and you can even see they have a little controller picture there. They have their own script, and we're going to look at this later, but we're probably not going to use a whole lot of that. So let's jump back here. There is one more piece that we need. We need a script. We'll just go ahead and put it on this. I'm a little surprised it's not already on there because it's hard to make a VR game without it in Godot. But that's alright. It's pretty easy to fix. I'm going to plop this out into... Oops, didn't mean to click that. I'm going to pop this out. I have no idea what that is. Into this. And this is what I need to copy. So here we go. We're going to paste that in, clean this up. So let's walk through this script real quick. All this does is it does some printing based on this AR VR server. It gets the interface count, so it'll tell us how many VR interfaces we have, loops through those interfaces and prints the name of them, and then we find a reference to one called Oculus, and then if that thing exists, so if it was able to find it, then we call this initialize function on it, and that's pretty much all we need to do to start up VR. We don't need this print stuff. We really just need those 3 lines of code right there. Now this helps clean up some... Oh, we probably do need this one. This one sets our main viewport to AR VR. And then this one, if you're doing the Steam one, the OpenVR, I believe you have to turn off HDR. There was something wrong with something that doesn't work about that, and I'm not sure if they've fixed that yet or not. But HDR stands for High Dynamic Range. I think it allows you to have more colors on screen or something. You probably won't notice it in most games, but that's just something to be aware of. And then here we're turning off VSync and trying to set the target FPS up to 90, so we got a nice smooth experience. And then we've got some else statements in case things aren't found. So if you tried to run this on a system that didn't have VR installed, it wouldn't crash and you'd have an idea of what was going on. Alright, so let's go ahead and play this, see what happens. So now I see the plane, and if I move my headset around, and the one thing about VR is it's extremely difficult to demo and not make people sick. So anyways, what you're seeing here on the screen is the left eye, I believe, is what they usually render, of the VR headset. And here's one of my controllers I'm lifting up. I'm holding my headset at the same time, so I can't grab the other one at the same time, but I can grab it there. So now you can see I can manipulate my controller, and you can see the controller model. Now the buttons don't work. They are working, but they don't, you can't see them move on the model. That's kind of one of the limitations, but that's alright. We've got, with basically just pasting in some boilerplate code, we've got a working VR. We can look around. Let's see if we find, there's that red box. You notice it's pretty smooth, so during this, kind of one of my things I want to try is to test what the performance of Godot is on VR. So we'll kind of experiment with that and see. But that's it for VR setup. Oh, one thing, let's go ahead and walk through this code real quick on the controller. So each of the controllers have this script on it. We'll go ahead and walk through it real quick to see what's going on. It extends AR/VR controller. So if you look that up in the docs, there's some certain properties that we can access there, and that gets us access to things like, if we look over here in the properties, we can set the rumble and get the controller ID. So we have access to some things like that. That's really neat, and we'll look at that later. But let's see. So here we're getting the world scale, and I believe he's scaling down the controllers based on the world scale. And the reason for this is if you design a world, right, and you've got all this whole world already designed, and now you want to implement VR into that world, everything may not be scaled correctly, and so instead of rewriting your entire game, what you want to do is scale your VR, AR/VR controller stuff, both the camera, so I believe it's back at this level. Here's the world scale property, so you can scale up or down the VR person kind of to match your level. And so anyways, it's really nice that it's there. We probably won't use that because we're starting from scratch, so we're going to make everything in the world match the the VR setup as it is. So, but that's what this is for. And then let's see. What he does right here is if it's not active, so if for whatever reason the controller is not active or not set up, the visibility will be false. And then otherwise it turns it on and emits this signal that it's activated. And then the one other thing you notice here is that the controller mesh is hanging out underneath underneath that. And that's where we see this model of the controller. And so one of the nice things is we could just delete this and replace this with a hand, and then we've got a hand replacement. Alright, that's it for this video. See you next time.